In 1785, while the ink on the Declaration of Independence was still wet, a small Rhode Island town made a decision that would change America forever. They decided to celebrate independence, not just once, but every single year, without fail. For the next 241 years, through wars, depressions, pandemics, and a complete transformation of society, they never stopped. And today, we're about to reveal the untold story of how one parade became the heartbeat of a nation.
Mr. Stark here, and today we're traveling back through time to Bristol, Rhode Island to uncover how a single tradition became a living monument to American resilience. You think you know what the 4th of July looks like. Wait until you see where it all began. Picture Bristol, Rhode Island, July 4th, 1785. The Revolutionary War has been over for just 2 years. The wounds are still fresh. Young men have returned home, some missing limbs, some carrying scars that will never heal. The nation itself is fragile. There's no guarantee America will survive. But in Bristol, something remarkable happened. The townspeople gathered, farmers, merchants, veterans still in their makeshift uniforms, and they decided, we will march, we will celebrate, we will remind ourselves and everyone who watches that we are free. That first parade was nothing like what you're imagining. There were no elaborate floats, no marching bands with brass instruments catching the sunlight. Instead, there were local militia members in their Revolutionary War uniforms walking down Hope Street. Families lined the streets, church bells rang. The American flag, still so new, so strange, was carried with reverence. What made this moment so extraordinary wasn't the spectacle, it was the determination. In a town reeling from war, they chose joy. They chose continuity. They chose to say, this matters. This moment matters. And we will honor it forever. That single decision, made 241 years ago, created something unprecedented in American history. Why was this decision so radical? What was Bristol truly protecting by marching that day? The answer will shock you. Stay with us.
What happened next was almost impossible to predict. The Bristol Parade didn't become a one-time event. It didn't fade into local legend. Instead, it grew. Year after year, decade after decade, more people came. More families decided, this is our tradition now. This is how we say we're American. By the early 1800s, the parade had evolved. Local merchants began creating small floats. Local blacksmiths forged parade decorations. Women's groups sewed elaborate banners. What started as a solemn march became a genuine celebration, but it never lost that original sacred purpose.
Here's what's absolutely remarkable. This was happening while most of America was still figuring out what the 4th of July even meant. Other towns, other cities, they celebrated sporadically, without consistency. But Bristol made a promise that transcended individual lives, individual generations. By 1835, 50 years in, Bristol's parade was famous across all of New England. People traveled for days on horseback and in carriages just to witness it. Why? Because they could feel something genuine happening. They could feel that a community had chosen to keep a sacred fire burning. But then, everything changed. The next challenge would test whether this tradition could survive, and it would nearly break America apart.
The American Civil War. 4 years of unimaginable horror. Brother fighting brother, fathers fighting sons. Nearly 700,000 people died. And in Bristol, the parade continued. This is where the story becomes almost incomprehensible. While the nation was literally tearing itself apart, while young men from Bristol were dying in fields in Virginia and Georgia and Tennessee, the townspeople made a choice. They would not stop the parade. They would not let the war kill this tradition. But here's the thing. It wasn't done with celebration, not in the way we think of celebration today.
During the Civil War years, the Bristol Parade transformed into something else entirely. It became a prayer, a collective mourning, black bunting draped across buildings, families marching in honor of sons who would never come home. Military units, depleted, exhausted, marching through streets lined with women in black dresses, faces tear-stained. The parade became a way of saying, "We are still here. We are still united. Despite this nightmare, we refuse to disappear." One historical account from 1863 describes a mother marching in the parade, carrying her son's empty military jacket, holding it like it was the most precious thing in the world. She wasn't celebrating, she was testifying that her son had mattered, that his sacrifice had meaning. This is when the Bristol Parade became more than just a tradition. It became something sacred, a ritual of collective survival. But could it survive what came next? The answer will show you why this parade matters more than you ever imagined.
By the turn of the 20th century, something extraordinary had happened. The Bristol Parade had survived its greatest test, and now it began to evolve in ways that would shock the original 1785 organizers. The 1920s brought something new to Bristol, not just to the parade, but to the entire town: automobiles, electricity, modern technology. For the first time, the parade featured motorized vehicles. Horse-drawn carriages were replaced with decorated cars. Marching bands with brass instruments became more sophisticated. The visual spectacle multiplied. But here's what's fascinating. Even as the form of the parade changed dramatically, its soul remained exactly the same. It was still about gathering, still about remembering, still about saying, "We are a community."
Then came the Great Depression in 1929. Money disappeared. Families struggled to feed their children. And yet, the parade continued. Not with less passion, with more. Because during the darkest economic times, communities needed something to hold on to. They needed that one guaranteed moment every year when they could gather and remember that they were part of something larger than their own suffering. World War II brought another test. Young men from Bristol marched off to fight across two oceans. The parade became, once again, a prayer, a ritual of remembrance, a promise that when these soldiers returned, if they returned, they would be welcomed home with the same parade that had existed since 1785. By 1950, the Bristol Parade had absorbed a century of change, war, economic upheaval, and technological revolution, and it was stronger than ever. But the greatest transformation was still ahead, and it would happen in the decades you think you know. The second half of the 20th century nearly destroyed everything America believed in. The 1960s brought social upheaval, protests against war, generational conflict. Families argued at dinner tables about what patriotism even meant anymore. The Vietnam War divided America in ways that seemed permanent. Young people rejected the traditions of their parents. The future felt uncertain. In most American towns, the 4th of July celebration became politicized. Celebrations that once united communities now became flashpoints for division. Some communities stopped celebrating altogether, viewing patriotism as something toxic. But in Bristol, something remarkable happened. The parade adapted. It made space for different expressions of patriotism. It didn't demand uniformity. It said, "You can march if you support the war, and you can march if you oppose it. What matters is that we gather. What matters is that we remember we're part of something larger than ourselves." This is when Bristol's parade became genuinely revolutionary, not in a radical sense, but in the deepest sense of the word. A revolution toward inclusion while maintaining tradition. By the 1980s and 1990s, the parade had become something extraordinary. A place where different generations, different political beliefs, even different visions of America could somehow coexist in the same moment, the same street, the same community ritual. The parade didn't solve America's divisions, but it proved something powerful, that traditions don't have to be rigid. They can be living, breathing, evolving things that hold space for complexity, for disagreement, even for pain. And then the new millennium arrived. What nobody expected was that the biggest test and the greatest triumph was still to come.
September 11th, 2001, America's worst nightmare. Within hours of those attacks, communities across the nation were grappling with shock, fear, and the most profound sense of vulnerability. Nothing felt safe. Everything felt fragile. And in Bristol, Rhode Island, people asked themselves the same question communities have asked for 216 years.
Do we still hold the parade this July? The answer was immediate. Yes, more than yes. It became the most important parade in the town's history.
The 2001 Bristol 4th of July parade was different, more solemn, more reflective. Military personnel marched with renewed significance. First responders, police, firefighters, emergency workers were treated like returning soldiers. American flags were everywhere, but they weren't celebratory. They were protective, a community wrapping itself in symbols of unity during unimaginable darkness. What happened in Bristol happened nowhere else. The parade became a national symbol. News networks sent crews to cover it. People from across America watched this small Rhode Island town march down Hope Street, and something shifted, something healed. From 2001 onward, the Bristol Parade's significance grew exponentially. It became one of the oldest continuously held 4th of July celebrations in America. Not just old, but continuously, without a single break. Not once in 226 years did Bristol cancel or postpone the parade. Think about that.
Through recessions, through the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, through a global pandemic in 2020, when most events were canceled, Bristol held the parade. Sometimes smaller, sometimes with restrictions, but always, always held. Then came 2020, COVID-19, a virus that shut down the entire world. Most traditions crumbled, most celebrations were postponed, but Bristol made a choice. We will find a way. And they did. They modified the parade, made it safer, but they didn't break the chain. Now, in 2026, the Bristol Parade has just completed its 241st consecutive year. That's not just a parade. That's a promise kept. That's a community saying, no matter what happens, war, depression, plague, division, we will gather. We will remember. We will choose unity. And the story behind how they kept this promise, despite impossible odds, reveals something about America itself.
You know what's extraordinary about the Bristol 4th of July parade? It's not complicated. It's simple. It's just a parade. But that simplicity is the entire point. In a world of constant disruption, in an era where traditions collapse overnight and communities fracture, Bristol made a choice. We will keep this one thing, this one small, ordinary, beautiful thing. We will gather. We will march. We will remember.
For 241 years, that choice has echoed across generations. Revolutionary War veterans stood on those streets. Civil War mothers held their fallen sons' empty jackets. Depression-era families gathered for something free that fed their souls. World War II soldiers returned home to the parade their grandparents had created. Vietnam War protesters and supporters marched in the same parade. September 11th survivors found healing in that parade. And in 2020, when the world shut down, Bristol refused to break. This isn't just history. This is a statement about what America could be. Not perfect, not without conflict, but a place where communities choose continuity, where people decide, we matter. This moment matters, and we will show up together, no matter what.
The Bristol Parade proves something that seems almost impossible to believe anymore. That traditions aren't chains, they're bridges. Bridges connecting us to the people who came before and the people who will come after. Every person who marches in that parade, whether they're a military veteran or a child born 50 years after the last war, whether they agree politically on everything or nothing, they're participating in something that matters. They're saying yes to community, yes to continuity, yes to the idea that some things are worth keeping alive. That's why this parade is remarkable. That's why it matters. And that choice, that simple, profound choice, is what every American should understand.
Mr. Stark here again. And I have to tell you, researching this story, understanding 241 years of unbroken continuity, it changed something in how I think about community, about tradition, about what it means to be American. We live in a time of constant disruption. Nothing feels permanent. Everything feels fragile. And it's easy to become cynical, to think that nothing lasts, that nothing matters. But then there's Bristol, a small town that made a choice over 2 centuries ago to gather, to remember, to say that some things are worth protecting. In 2026, when you walk down Hope Street in Bristol on July 4th, you're not just watching a parade,
You're participating in something that has survived wars, depressions, pandemics, and a complete transformation of society. You're connected directly to people who stood on that same street in 1785, in 1863, in 1945, in 2001. That's not just tradition. That's evidence that humans need each other, evidence that community matters, evidence that when we choose to show up for each other, across generations, across divisions, across time itself, something profound happens. The Bristol Parade teaches us that small acts of continuity matter more than we know, that gathering, remembering, and choosing each other year after year, no matter what, is how we stay human, how we stay connected, how we build something that outlasts us. That's what 241 years of unbroken tradition teaches us.
If this story moved you, if you understand why 241 years of unbroken tradition matters in a world that feels like it's falling apart, then I'm asking you to do 3 things. First, share this story. Tell someone about the Bristol Parade. Tell them about a community that refused to stop gathering. Tell them that traditions like this still exist. Second, find your own Bristol. Look around your community and find one tradition worth protecting, one gathering worth showing up for, one thing that connects you to the people around you and the people before you. And third, subscribe. Because we're going to keep telling stories like this, stories that prove human connection still matters, stories that show us what we're capable of when we choose each other. Thank you for spending these 15 minutes understanding why a small Rhode Island town's parade is actually a message about America itself. Mr. Stark, signing off.